Another lens has been added to the ever-growing Sony G Master lens lineup, and this one is for the portrait and telephoto lovers. Introducing the Sony 135mm 1.8 G Master lens, and today we're going to see what it's all about. So why would you buy the Sony 135 G Master or a 135mm in general? If you really want to do close-up portraiture and really want to pop the subject from the background, what the G Master gives you is not only a shallow depth of field of 1.8, but you also get the effects of compression to really pop the subject out from the background. Highly beneficial for anyone looking to do really close-up portraiture photography or video work. My first impressions on the Sony 135 G Master is when you touch it, it is big. It is quite a heavy lens as well. Now, I don't have the exact specifications from Sony in terms of how heavy it actually weighs, nor do I have scales to actually weigh it, so I'm going to estimate it's around 800 to 900 grams, making it a front-heavy setup if you do pair it with any Sony body. For more comfortable use, we'd highly recommend using it with some kind of grip, so you have a bit more support in the back end of your kit. Like any other G Master lens, the 135mm sports a pretty good focus ring. It's well rubberized, nice and big, and has some great resistance to it. And like any other G Master system, it does have a more refined focus by wire motor and integration with the camera, which will benefit a lot of video users. Speaking of video users, it does have two programmable focus hold buttons on the actual lens. With either of these buttons, you can program them to do certain setting changes. For example, for video users, you could program one to do focus peaking. On the side of the lens, you've got two switches. You've got your autofocus to manual focus switch, and you've also got a focus limiter as well. On the opposite side, there is a declicker, which will allow you to declick the aperture ring to smoothly go through your depth of field, which is really beneficial for video users. So now I'm just going to run over the features of the Sony 135mm G Master lens. First off, you've got a maximum aperture of 1.8 all the way up to a minimum aperture of f22, backed up with a 11 rounded blade aperture diaphragm for really premium looking bokeh. In terms of its actual elements on the inside, you've got one XA element just to help with field curvature as well as chroma, and two extra low dispersion elements just to help with color fringing and chromatic aberrations. In terms of its autofocusing, it does have an XD linear focus motor to keep it nice and quiet and quite quick. In addition as well, it works with all your Sony features such as eye autofocus and continuous autofocus tracking modes. The lens does have a relatively close focus distance of 70 centimeters, and to back up its performance when using outdoors, you do have fluorine coating just to help combat against the elements as well as fingerprint smudging. And lastly, you've got a AR coating just to help with surface reflections as well as ghosting. All right, so let's see how close this lens really zooms a person into. So right now, I've got Josh's nose in peak focus. And so I'm going to take a step back. Another step back. And we're just going to go until we can get a nice acceptable looking portrait. And I think now we've got a pretty decent one. That's my favorite one. Right up close, dude. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shoot a set of images from f4 all the way down to f1.8 just to test how sharp the images look. Because from what I can see in the camera, the images look sharp on all apertures. In fact, even when opened wide up to 1.8, it looks pretty damn sharp. And this is in the corners, the center, basically everywhere in the frame, which is really impressive, especially for a lens of this focal length and aperture rating. So just to further explain how really close you can get with the lens, looking at the DMX sign right now, if you point the lens straight at the sign, you can really only get 3 letters in. And that's a fair distance away. Now, if you put this on a APS-C body, such as an A6000, you'll get about maybe 200 mils of focal length, making this a really powerful telephoto lens as well. So talking about autofocus, the motor in the lens works pretty well with the autofocus system in the Sony camera. Today I've got a Sony a7 III, so you'll know that the focus system is a lot more sophisticated compared to the Mark II series, but in saying that, the focusing in general with the speed and accuracy is really, really good, and it's extremely surprising for a telephoto lens to really focus this well. Now, on top of that as well, when shooting outdoors and just around the area, it does pretty well with highlights. The coatings all do their job. Just one thing about this lens is it is a bit weird to use around, because really the lens takes up all of my left hand, and it kind of doesn't really feel like I'm holding a camera at all, like I'm just holding the lens and that the camera is like the secondary part of this kit. So as I said earlier, I think getting a grip or a battery grip of some kind will really help enhance the user experience with this lens. Otherwise, you're just gonna feel like you're holding a lens around all day, which may not be ideal. Sample images today were shot on a Sony a7 III and a Sony 135mm 1.8 G Master. The image quality on the lens is nothing short of fantastic. The sharpness is consistent throughout the frame, in the corners and in the center. Its performance in super bright environments and highlights is up to the G Master standard. Vignetting is fairly minimal on the lens, which may not require post-correction. Bokeh looks fantastic on the lens, and the degree of separation from the background is very apparent. The combination of low depth of field and compression really gives the images some pop. So just before I forget, there are a couple other user experiences that I've had with this lens that I really like. So first of all, like I said earlier, with the focus hold button being quite useful for video, it is also really useful for photographers as well, especially when there's two of them on the lens. Now, they both are only programmed to do one function, but having two on the lens just means that no matter if you're shooting portrait or landscape, you always have an easier way to access your focus hold button. Right now, what I've got one of them programmed to is ISO, which really makes my life a lot easier when I need to change my ISO and I don't have to take the camera off my face, flick through some settings just to get there. I just press the focus hold button once, and then I can scroll down and easily select my ISO. Secondly, the aperture ring is a really nice addition to the lens. Being able to cycle through the maximum and minimum aperture range really quickly is fantastic. And on top of that, having a declick function makes it really versatile for people who are doing video or just want a smoother transition between the max and minimum apertures. In conclusion, the Sony 135mm 1.8 G Master lens is a must-have portrait lens in our opinion. Its effects of compression and extreme sharpness when even shot wide open at 1.8 is fantastic. One of my biggest gripes normally with telephoto lenses is its autofocus performance and difficulty in stabilization, but combine that with the 5-axis in-body in the A7 series, plus on top of that, the really sophisticated autofocusing speeds and reliability, this really makes this lens a very powerful, versatile portrait as well as telephoto lens. Now that doesn't come cheap either, as the lens costs pretty close to $3,000 Australian, which means that for a lot of people, this may not be a lens that they'll have in their kit as a staple. However, like I said earlier, if you are a portrait photographer or are looking to get a really good prime for some telephoto work, then we highly recommend getting one of these bad boys. If you have any questions on the Sony 135mm G Master, pop them in the comments below. Make sure to check out our description for our links to Facebook, Instagram, as well as our blog, so you don't miss out on our latest written reviews, as well as what's going on in store. And as always, if you enjoyed our video, hit the like button and the subscribe button so you don't miss out on our next update as we upload videos weekly.